Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Five Heart Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Todd Wolverton. And tonight, my partner in crime is the incredible, dynamic, devastating John Dam Johnston, founder, creator, major contributor of Corn Nation. John, how the hell are you doing tonight?
I'm a little old and tired. I'm being pushed into the background, just like socialism is taking over the country. You're taking over the podcast.
It was only a matter of time, buddy.
Yeah. Free thinking, good, honest people are being, especially if they're old, white, crusty dudes, are being pushed to the ground by other old, white, crusty dudes.
Well, speaking of white, old, crusty dudes, that's a nice segue. John, living up there in the far north in Minneapolis, you know what? A year ago, roughly today, one of the most devastating incidents in recent American history happened. And it's been covered a little bit on the news recently, focusing on the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. I know last year, I don't know whether it was out of curiosity or just whatever. I know that you participated in a little bit of a few of the marches, and you got down just to kind of see what it was all about. So I'm just kind of curious, John, a year removed from that sorrowful incident, what are things like up in the Twin Cities? I know you're getting out and about a little bit more. You're not totally isolated in your room. So
I haven't gotten out that much. I mean, I haven't gone down to Minneapolis for quite a while now since we were at US Bank Stadium. But I imagine, well, I didn't ask permission to say this, but my daughter got her court papers today because she was arrested for being in a protest. And I think I'll probably just say that part and leave the specifics out of it. But basically, they kind of detained them in the area they were in, wouldn't let them leave, and then they arrested a whole gob of them. And I have had people ask me, were you upset by this? And my response to that is, you can't raise children to speak their mind, stand up for what they believe in, and have live their own lives, and then be pissed off at them when they do it. So, I wouldn't say that I was proud of her, but I am proud of her for for doing what she believed in. A year later, if things changed, I don't know if that much has changed. And I've been thinking about this lately, and I don't really have a lot of. Maybe it's because I'm old and cynical, and I try not to be that way, but I don't have a lot of hope that a whole gob is going to change because of this. I mean, you can go back, and Richard Pryor was one of my favorite comedians. In fact, in 1976, he released an album called Bicentennial N-Word, with the word we can't say anymore. And my mom bought that album. In 1976, I was 14 maybe? Yeah, 14. I can't hardly do the math. And she would play records all the time, and she played that. And if you go back and listen to that album, you can listen to it on Spotify. It is filthy. It is nasty. And I'm like, Mom, what are you playing this for? And she goes, you should listen to Richard Pryor. He's really funny. And it was just dirty, raw, filthy stuff. But you could go back to Richard Pryor's acts in like 70s and him talking about being shot by police with no repercussions. So, this has been going on our whole life. And I don't, maybe if they do, they're talking about passing some national law where they have a database full of, where they track the policemen who had complaints. I think that's really the key piece of that. And you could argue both sides that if you do that, then people won't want to be policemen. And I don't know, you can't, it's kind of like the war on drugs. You can't do the same shit year after year after year and have anything change. So I think they should change things. Try some stuff. I don't know about defunding the police completely, but
no. I think that's a horrible term to use, and I think most people would recognize that there that there does need to be some reforms, and hopefully that will happen, and at least in the news outlets I pay attention to, they've had some information about that recently, but certainly it's.
The reason why I went to that protest is because I was sitting around and I thought, we have so much shit with the people with the fake news and the internet. And the internet is so huge and so varied. You literally can just think something and go out and find whatever articles you want to support your bias. And my thought was, you know what? There's a whole gob of protests going on. My daughter was involved in them. I talked to her about not being involved in violent protests. What would I do? And she said, you should go, but don't go alone. So I took my future daughter-in-law, but I really, I went because I wanted to go talk to people. I wanted to go talk to them about why they were angry and why they were protesting, and not hear it from a reporter and not hear it from the Star Tribune or through a third party. And that's what I did. I went down there and I talked to a whole gob of people, and it really just, I kind of knew this, but I never really admitted it to myself. But there's a whole percentage of our population that sees this country in a different way that I do. And maybe rather than just yelling at them and disagreeing with them and reading our websites that confirm our bias, if we just listen to them, maybe we'd be a better country in the long run. So that's why I went.
Yeah. Well,
I haven't I haven't done that since, but I thought about going down there when the verdict was going to be read, but I thought,
maybe not.
I'm old and I can't run anymore.
Well, speaking of a better country, and I know that this is a Nebraska podcast, and we're going to get to Nebraska athletics here in just a minute. But speaking of a better country, John, I know that you are planning to visit another part of our great country. Actually, I think you're going to a foreign country. Little international travel coming up this week. For those of you out there that don't know, John has spent a little bit of his life in the Republic of Texas and worked down there when he was a young man, and he has relatives down there. And I understand that, John, you need to get your passport ready to go because you're taking off and you're going to go to the country of Texas, where anyone can have a gun at any time, and I think probably use it without any kind of repercussions. So I guess
that's not true at all. There's huge repercussions, because if you use it, them motherfuckers be shooting back at you immediately, and they're probably better at it.
So you're headed to Texas to spend some time with family. You got a nephew or a grandnephew that's graduating from high school down there, and so safe travels.
One of the best soccer goalies in the state of Texas.
Cool. Great. Yeah. Great. Maybe is Nebraska recruiting him for their Division I soccer program? Or wait.
Okay. The last thing I heard about him was that he was accepted at the University of Arkansas. And I don't think, friends wouldn't let friends go to Arkansas. So just go down there and go, what the fuck? You're going to spend the rest of your life saying pig suey to people.
Woo!
Like, you know what I mean? No, nobody wants that. You shouldn't do that. Nobody subject other people to that unless they're actually just from Arkansas. Nobody should ever leave where they're at and go into Arkansas and attend that fucking university ever. So that's my goal for this trip, is to go grab the kid and go, what the fuck are you doing? What is wrong with you? Pig suey. I just say it all weekend until you're sick of it.
I think that's a good strategy, John. I think that's a real good strategy. So, yeah.
And if that doesn't work, I'm just going to have to shoot him, because that's what you do in Texas.
Well, John, I guess I've had a good week myself. One of a young student athlete that I worked with, how time flies. But, not quite 30 years ago, I had the opportunity to coach a young lady. Her name was Teresa Breifogel, when I was at Galva-Holstein, my first teaching and coaching assignment. And I kind of became her personal coach to some extent. I was an assistant track coach, and the head coach, made me responsible for the high jumpers and long jumpers. Long story short, the young lady ended up being a 6-time state champion and a Drake champion. She won the high jump.
How do you become a 6-time state champion?
She won the high jump 3 times, and she won the high jump 3 times outdoors, 1 time indoors, and then she won the long jump twice. And she's the only.
Thinking this was some kind of Iowa thing where she graduated from couldn't get past being a sophomore.
There you go. But no, she actually, and she's the only athlete, the only female athlete, and possibly the only athlete, male or female, that has actually won the high jump and the long jump in the same year, and she did it twice. So anyway, Teresa Breifogel was recently, last weekend, she was inducted into the Iowa High School Girls Athletic Union Track and Field Hall of Fame, which that was really cool. And while I didn't see the ceremony, it's when you get our age, and especially in education, they always tell you, you never know what kind of an impact you have at the time you're making an impact. And when kids are 15, 16, 18 years old, very rarely do they truly understand what kind of an impact a particular teacher or coach may have had on them and on their life. And it was really gratifying to me to see her when she was in high school, when she competed and when she excelled, and watched her a little bit in college when she competed. But then, 25 years later, when she is inducted into a Hall of Fame, that's a great feeling. And in some communication I've had with her in the last couple of days, it's been really fun kind of reconnecting. So I've had a good week on those terms. So anyway, but we need to move on to Nebraska sports. Nobody cares about you going to Texas. Nobody cares about me being a former track and field coach. Right now, when we talk about Nebraska,
I care, Todd. I care.
When we talk about Nebraska sports, John, we are up to our necks in Husker baseball. So why don't you bring us up to speed a little bit with the Cornhusker baseball team?
We won the Big Ten. And we were picked 8th at the beginning of the season. And at the beginning of the actually, I think before the season started, I interviewed one of the guys from D1 baseball, Patrick Ebert. My God, I butchered his name probably. I was going to say Patrick Gerhardt. That's one of our guys. But I asked him, why are we picked 8th? I mean, seriously, look at our team. We can't be 8th. We're not going to finish 8th. And his response was, nobody knows what Will Bolt is going to do. And I don't think anybody had any idea what Will Bolt was going to be. I think his offense was going to be this dynamic, right? In the first real full year of coaching. He talked about the fact that they have some good looking arms, but again, nobody knew. Chance Roach was good at New Mexico State, and was he going to be good at Nebraska? Was Cade Povich. I mean, when you look at Nebraska's pitching, it's been very good throughout. I know we all have our favorite guys that we go internally in Slack. We go, and there's much swearing when he gets put into the lineup or into the, gets an appearance. But even he kicked ass this last weekend. So, the pitching staff, the pitching, the bullpen, the starters, and the offense, everything has come together this year, and it's been a really nice year. The freshman, Max Anderson, my wife and my youngest son were both watching, and my family hates baseball. We're a soccer family, and they hate watching baseball because they think it's boring, which is fine. It means I get to watch it alone. But my wife saw Max Anderson, and she's like, that kid looks like a geek. And I'm like, yeah, he kind of does. He looks like he's about 12. But,
Yeah.
I think what's next, maybe the biggest thing for this team is, in terms of a team, is Spencer Schwellenbach going to win Big Ten Player of the Year? Is somebody like Max Anderson going to be Freshman of the Year? Are we going to keep our win streak going this week against Michigan? What kind of a regional are we going to get into? What's our seed going to be? How far can they go? How far can they go, Todd?
Well, I'll tell you what, they're playing really good right now. And, it wasn't that many weeks ago that you and I were sitting on your sister's porch after they'd been swept by Rutgers. And, we kind of had that, oh my goodness, where are we at now? And I guess I'd have to go back and look at the recording because I don't think that either one of us expressed a lot of optimism. I don't think we were pessimistic about going forward, but I think, at least my recollection is we were kind of stunned by the fact that they'd gotten swept by Rutgers. That being said, what an incredible turnaround from then. And, this last weekend with those 4 games in the pod, I only got to watch really 2 of the games because on Saturday we were going to graduation parties around Central Iowa and I was trying to keep up. So I missed that incredible comeback with against Ohio State. I, kind of got into slack a little bit and I'm reading what's going on, with that conversation. And then Saturday night, I listened to a little bit of it on the radio, but what I can tell you is that was an incredible weekend. And, you talked about the pitching and the pitching has been solid this year. Has it been stellar and outstanding? There have been a couple of moments when I think it has been, I think of Chance Roach's game, on Saturday night was amazing. Cade Povich had a game earlier in the season that I thought was just an outstanding pitch to game. And there was even, I don't remember, I don't remember details that well, but I even remember that on a particular day, Shea Shanneman, I thought was just lights out. So the starting pitching, they've done some wonderful things, but, there were during that Rutgers series, the bullpen absolutely fell apart.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know it.
They read that article in the paper.
Yeah.
Their heads.
It may have, but you would not have known that if you would have watched Sunday's game from first pitch to last pitch. I remarked, my mom sat down and was watching a little bit of the game with me, and I remarked to her, I said, I can't believe every one of these pitchers, their breaking ball is just dropping off a table. I said, they have these hitters off balance. It didn't matter who was in the game. And, Max Schreiber, he threw as well as I've ever seen that guy throw and was really sharp. And Cody Frank came in a tough situation and excelled. This was a real feel-good weekend. That being said, now we've got Michigan coming to town on Friday. And while maybe a little of the luster might be off of this series because, Nebraska's already clinched, I think Nebraska fans are going to show up in force. And I think Nebraska fans are truly excited about having a big series against a quality team. If people remember, Michigan got second in the College World Series last year and have quite a few of those players back. So I think that Nebraska fans are going to show up. I hope that there's a lot of electricity in the stands. And, it could be a really exciting series. Is Nebraska going to sweep? I don't know. 2-1, 1-2. Who knows how it's all going to shake out? But I can tell you this. I think that there'll be some exciting, fantastic baseball going on this weekend down at Haymarket Park.
I think in Slack, we took the poll and we all thought we were going to finish 2-2 last weekend, and that would be decent.
That's where I was at. I thought if they were 2-2 last weekend, that would be good, and that would set things up pretty good for Nebraska this weekend. And if they went 2-1 this weekend, theoretically, there are other factors at play. But I thought if they'd go 2-1 this weekend, they could win the Big Ten championship. But they don't need it. They're the Big Ten champions. And that's really cool in my opinion.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens though against Michigan. I mean, they've won a Big Ten championship. They are kind of a young team. What happens to young guys when they think they've accomplished something, they get all full of themselves. And next thing you know, you're getting swept by Rutgers.
There's some truth to that, but there's some pretty strong leadership. And I think that leadership came to the surface after the Rutgers series. Anyway, so one of the things that, you also asked.
Wait a minute. Did you watch Sunday? What was it? Sunday's game? Yeah, Sunday's game. One of the announcers on BTN said something about they could share the title. They haven't clinched it yet because they may add more games. Yeah. And all of Twitter exploded. You're kind of like, the media guys went insane with this, and you're kind of like, they're not, number one, they're not adding games. He was just an off the cuff remark that the guy said, and suddenly it was revolution was going to happen. But I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. So no, and you asked the question. I guess I didn't answer your original question. How far can they go? Well, I'll tell you what. It all depends upon what regional they get in, and if they come through this weekend, and if they end up a second seed, an original, some people are talking going down to Lubbock with Texas Tech and being the number 2 seed, and they're predicting Tech would be an 8 seed. If they could go where there's a 7, 8 seed, if they could go to that regional 9th seed, if they could go to those kinds of regionals, I think that would be a great position. I really hope that they don't end up going down to Arkansas. That's the only place. And for reasons that you explained earlier, but also because right now Arkansas is a team, at least from what I've seen and what you read, Arkansas is far and away the top team in the country right now. But I think if you put Nebraska almost in any other place, I think that they'll have a chance to move through. I really do think they got a chance to advance to a super regional. And that would be really exciting if that were to happen. So, but I tell you what I do miss is the Big Ten tournament, and not having the Big Ten tournament this year, is there's an absence there. And I know that people have some different opinions, and I know that you on Corn Nation wrote an article today a little bit about the Big Ten tournament, and kind of gave fans an option. And the last time I looked at the poll, people that responded to your poll were pretty much in favor of kind of having a traditional season with a tournament. So, John, what are your thoughts about, the future of Big Ten schedules and tournaments?
I miss the Big Ten tournament, baseball tournament. I think I've shot the Big Ten baseball tournament probably, I have a number of years, and it's always been fun. I shot it at Target Field one year here in Minneapolis, and honest to God, there probably was maybe 500 people in the stands. So they need to not have it at Target Field. I think at one point they were going, we should have this at Major League Baseball parks. No, you shouldn't have it at fucking Major League Baseball parks. You should just go have it in Omaha, where it's always going to be full. And because it's full and exciting, it's going to have a national presence. And people are going to go, hey, that looks like fun. What is that? Big Ten baseball? What the hell? And then I think people did make good points about countering my argument about playing the entire Big Ten schedule. And I think, over on YouTube, people commented on the YouTube video I did too, but the most salient comment was, we don't really need to have a full Big Ten schedule just so we can play Penn State and Purdue. which yeah, you're right. When you play Penn State, all it does is drag your RPI into the fucking toilet, because they won't upgrade their baseball program because they're a bunch of fucking bastards. How about that, Penn State? I mean, Wisconsin's not going to have a baseball program. Please don't bother, because all you do is drag our RPI into the toilet too, you fucking Badger sons of bitches. Anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of a danged if you do and danged if you don't when it comes to having a tournament. But and just because other conferences have them, that's not necessarily a reason to do it. But I honestly think that the traditional schedule they've had, where teams play non-conference games, which gives teams an opportunity to get a bump on their RPI, I think those are incredibly important. I wouldn't mind seeing a season where they have a pod or two and, maybe play a couple of pods, if that's a way, to play more of the teams. Those 4 game weekends are kind of tough on pitching staffs. And so, but then you take that into account with your non-conference scheduling and your midweek games. And I know some people think maybe later in the season you can have a midweek series with, another conference team. But I really like the tournament, and if they could add a pod or two during the regular season, that might be kind of neat for the fans and for the players. I understand what people are saying with an 8-team tournament. You can eat up a lot of pitching. I get that. You don't have to have an 8-team tournament. You can go with a 6-team tournament or I had opportunity to follow my nephew this year at Central Missouri, and they have a very good team. And in that conference, the top 8 teams made quote unquote the playoffs, and they had, the number 1 against number 8, and they played a 3-game series on one weekend, and that all 8 of those teams played, those little 3-game series. And then the 4 winners went and they played a 14 tournament the following weekend. They did not chew up their pitching staff. So I think there's ways to make it work. And if people are creative and, have it at Rosenblatt every year, you're going to have a lot of people at Rosenblatt. The last year that Iowa,
I think Rosenblatt's gone now, Todd.
You're right. Rosenblatt. I'm old. Jiminy Christmas.
You miss it that much, huh?
Rosenblatt. Holy smokes.
I'd love to have a Rosenblatt too.
Have it in Omaha. But if you did that, because the last year that Iowa had a really good team when they had the tournament, there were a lot of Hawkeye fans that came over and watched. It won't just be, Nebraska fans they're going to turn up. But, anyway, enough said. We need to have a schedule similar to what they've had in years past, in my opinion.
Okay, so if they were going to actually change the format of the tournament, that means that they would actually have to think about Big Ten baseball and how it's structured and how it works and how they might display their sport on when it's nationally being focused upon. And that would require somebody who's in charge of the Big Ten to actually put his fucking mind to work.
Well,
which seems to be very difficult.
Well, if nothing else, through this entire COVID era, the Big Ten has been exposed. And if people didn't believe that the Big Ten was all about football and men's basketball, then they were drinking something different, because that's what greases the wheels. And the Big Ten barely makes a gesture towards acknowledging other sports. They've got the best volleyball conference, the best wrestling conference in the nation. And they're good in other sports. They're good in hockey. They're good in women's basketball. And they're good in baseball. But, it's sad how little attention the people at the Big Ten office have paid to baseball this season. It's horrible, in my opinion.
Well, we could bring up that one guy's name.
Would that be Kevin Warren?
It would be.
Yeah.
Today, now this tweet has been deleted, and I posted it into our Slack room, and maybe I'll try to do some screenshots to go with the article. But today, Buckeye Scoop tweeted they tweeted, and what they said was the gist of their tweet was Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren apparently didn't quite believe the Ohio State football parents were genuine. And when you read these tweets, basically what you get is from Ohio State's Gene Smith, is the statement that Kevin Warren is alleging that the letter is being manufactured. In other words, the Ohio State parents' letter back when we were fighting to have a football season. What does it say about a guy that leads a conference who, honest to God, thinks that their parents manufacturing a letter, or that anything is fake about this shit? What kind of dense moronic boob do you have to be to think that any of that is not real? Or are you just paranoid?
What it demonstrates is that Kevin Warren was not equipped to be the commissioner of the Big Ten. And okay, you can give him a little slack because he was just hired recently before the pandemic hit. So you can give him a little bit of slack there. There's no question that the presidents and chancellors run the conference. But Kevin Warren's job is to appease the presidents and the chancellors, but it's to work closely with the ADs. And it is very apparent that up to that point, he did not communicate effectively with the ADs. He had not built relationships with the ADs. For him to doubt the authenticity of something that Gene Smith brought to his attention is just ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. I believe that if ADs in the conference had turned parents loose, they would have stormed Indianapolis. If ADs would have encouraged parents, to become more active, the Big Ten couldn't have held them back with riot gear. So I don't know. I have my doubts about the leadership of Kevin Warren and how long he is going to. I tell you what, he's not cut out for the job, and that's become very apparent.
Well, what is it? Newton's second law of physics.
John, I wasn't good at physics. Is that an object will stay in motion until an equal and opposite force stops it from being in motion, or something else, something like that? I'm close, aren't I?
Basically what it says in real life is it says things are going to stay the same unless they're acted upon by an external force. So the key with Kevin Warren is there's two things with Kevin Warren, really, probably more than that. But number one, is anybody going to trust this guy to do anything but hand out trophies from now on? I mean, he's going to, at some point, if he stays, he's going to have to negotiate the next TV contract that's going to supposedly keep all these athletic departments floating and making shitloads of money, honestly. You going to trust him to do that? Is anybody going to trust him to do that? Are the chancellors and presidents going to trust him? I don't see how you can.
I don't see how you can. I really don't. I don't know.
The other problem is this guy, if this guy expects to show up and hand out trophies and not be booed, he's going to be sadly, he's going to be disappointed.
Well, he wasn't in he wasn't in Bloomington to hand the trophy to the Cornhusker baseball. Of course, he'd have to realize that the Big Ten has baseball in order to show up in Bloomington. And apparently he hasn't gotten that far down on his list of Big Ten sports, that he needs to pay attention to. So,
he did an interview with Mike DeSorcy of the Sporting News 8 days ago. And I think I did a flakes with this, and it is the most, it's so softball-y stuff. I mean, it's so, don't ask any hard questions of the guy. And you kind of get this, here's the thing with people, just so you know, when you're around media stuff, okay, it's really difficult to ask coaches a lot of times very hard questions, because if you ask them really hard questions, they're going to go, yeah, could you not show up anymore to be a media guy and cover this team? Because that's what they do. And if, you can say, why doesn't that guy ask that question? Why doesn't he put the screws to him? I don't know, probably because he wouldn't have a job if he did that. That's how media works on a certain level. You don't just get to go into an interview, especially after a game or things like that, and beat the shit out of a guy. There has to be some tact in it. That's probably the hard part of sports writing, is having that tact, which is why every time I've ever been an oppressor, I say nothing. except I did years ago at the Big Ten baseball tournament. I kind of went after Jim Delaney a little bit. And I think I upset some guys in Omaha doing that because I took over some of the questioning. Anyway, this interview with Mike DeSorcy is it literally, I think I wrote in flakes that it reads like a high school senior did it who wanted to be a journalist. because they discuss a variety of topics in the progress of the league. And there's nothing in here about anything about going back on his Big Ten decision. Nothing in here about, you said Nebraska needed to leave the Big Ten if they wanted to play somebody else. Kevin Warren's big moment in which he had tried to act like he had a spine. Listen, there's some things in here where he says, we were able to launch a mental health coalition, which has done incredible work. We have provided the Calm app to all of our Big Ten student athletes and coaches and other Big Ten constituents. And we'd had over 250 downloads of the app within the last year. I think if you're doing this during a pandemic and that's what you're touting as an accomplishment, you really need to get out more, man. You know what? We gave people an app and they downloaded it. And I get that maybe mental health is kind of a big issue, but you're kind of like, that's really it. We're proud that we gave them an app and they downloaded it. What the fuck? That was the part of the interview where I went, okay, man.
Well, John, you
really
mentioned that.
Trying hard here.
And you talk about that, and we briefly talked about it earlier, when that rumor floated around out there about adding games, so that all the teams played. And I thought, this is exactly what's running through my mind. I thought, God, if they add a game, Nebraska fans are going to come unglued. And so then all 13 other colleges and universities are going to pile on Nebraska fans for being little whiny bitches again. And, I'm of the school that Nebraska fans need to quit bitching and complaining, and just move forward. But if that would have happened, I would have thought, oh my God, this state, at least the baseball fans in the state of Nebraska, and just pure Nebraska fans, they would absolutely come unglued. And then here we're going to have the Twitter wars all over again. Thank God that didn't come to fruition. So anyway, well, John, what else do you got for this week? You got anything else, or is it about time for us to call it good?
I thought we were bitching more about Kevin Warren. I do have an honest, I mentioned bias earlier at the beginning of this thing, right? How you could go out on the internet and find bias, find whatever your position is and whatever political, I don't care if it's science, religion, politics, teams, fans, sports, whatever. You can find something that agrees with your position on the internet.
Yep.
And one of the things that I have spent my life doing is being an IT consultant. And that means I provide solutions to customers. And a lot of times I provide 2 or 3 different options. And a lot of times I will describe what we're going to do to fix their problem. And they'll go, great. And I'll say, no, what if I'm wrong? And they'll go, what? What if I'm wrong? What if you're going to spend all this money and I turned out being wrong? Well, what are we going to do? You're going to tell me I'm right. Right now, when we're discussing this, and we've discussed contingency planning on this show before, you come up with options, right? You look at things and you go, this is what I think about this, but what if I'm wrong? In other words, I could be wrong. What other options are there to me being wrong? So when I look at Kevin Warren, I really want to give the guy a benefit of the doubt. And I really want to say, well, maybe it was really hard during the pandemic. And maybe it was really, maybe he did an okay job. Maybe we're being unfair. And I really want to look at it from that angle. And I think that this is where you tell me yes or no. Am I being unfair? I called him really bad names on Twitter last fall.
Well, I
don't, maybe that was harsh, but I don't think he can't go forward being the commissioner. I don't think.
And I guess I mentioned it earlier. I think it's going to be very difficult because, we're going to get through the softball and baseball seasons. They're going to have the off season, whatever, virtually again this year, I believe. I don't think everybody's going to Chicago for the Big Ten whoop-de-doo, whatever it's called.
The BTN 10K, Todd.
Well, yeah, 5K. I'm doing 5K.
Okay.
But, and then football season is going to start. And, unless you're going to stay tuned into Big Ten Network, what's going to be out there to try to boost the excitement for the Big Ten Conference. And I guess where I'm leading up to is I understand that that he took this position in an era that had never been seen before for college athletics. That incredibly difficult, but he blew it. And like I said quite a bit earlier in this podcast, the Big Ten has been exposed, and the conference doesn't give a shit about anything other than men's basketball and football. And they will bend over backwards to keep those two sports at the top of the national profile. They did it to make sure Ohio State had a shot to get into the playoffs, and they did it by packing games in so that Michigan could get enough games to justify a number one seed in basketball. Basketball played non-conference. No one else played any non-conference. It's just disgusting to me the way that this conference has absolutely crapped on every other sport. And like I said, no conference is better than the Big Ten in volleyball. No conference is better than the Big Ten in wrestling. And in those two sports, it's not even close. And yet they handcuffed both of them. And, they put up restrictions and limitations. And they will argue day and night that they did it out of concern for safety. But right. You know what? There were other conferences that got through this too. And, I was Mr. Gloom and Doom back in the fall. I sure was. And, I don't think I was proven wrong. But certainly it didn't get as bad as what I thought it could. But it was different. And there were teams and athletes that were negatively impacted because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19. But the Big Ten Conference was not given a fighting chance to compete against other conferences, schools from other conferences in any of those sports except for basketball, not even football. They weren't given a chance.
So do you think that the presidents and chancellors what's going to take to get a different commissioner?
I think that there's probably some athletic departments. I know two of them that wear red that I don't think are real fans of his leadership at this point. If I know that Gene Smith has a tremendous amount of influence at Ohio State. How closely connected Bill Moose is with the chancellor here at Nebraska. It's going to take 3 or 4 schools to really start putting a lot of pressure on the other schools.
How do you fire a commissioner?
You fire a commissioner.
You just go in one day and go, well, it didn't work out, Bob.
Well, in the Pac-10,
security will see you to the door, and we'll get
the Pac-10's commissioner. Was he fired or did he resign under duress? In the Pac-12, the Pac-12 commissioner, he's gone, and in large part, he lost. He lost favor with the ADs real early on. He only hung on as long as he did because he was in the good graces of some of the presidents. So.
Oh, here's January 20th, 2021. Larry Scott finally fired as Pac-12 commissioner.
Okay, there you go. So you fire a commissioner.
Parting ways with the finger quotes.
Unfortunately, these TV rights, that's not something you negotiate in a month. And I'm not sure how far off that decision is made. But, you don't want to bring in, somebody right off the bat has to jump, with both feet into that process. So
I would think that like August 15th would be a really good time, because you're coming out of a pandemic. Things are going to look great. People are going to be excited to be going back into their stadiums, listening to their college football teams' fall practices. And you could go, hey, guess what? We got a new commissioner, and here he is. And he could go out and be introduced at games and wave to crowds and be welcomed. Like maybe this fall.
I think that's wishful thinking.
Oh God!
But I don't have any faith. I don't have any faith in his leadership. And I tried to give him benefit of the doubt early on, that the commissioners are truly, the presidents and the chancellors are truly the ones that are in control, and they are. But Kevin Warren has not represented the athletic departments well, and he has not represented the student athletes, and he's not represented the sports other than football and basketball.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty much it. That sums it up. Should that sum up our show?
I think that probably sums up our show. So
I have to make sure I'm ready at 4 a.m. to go to Texas.
Well, there you go. There you go, buddy. I hope you come back.
Yeah, I'm flying Southwest, so I got a layover in Houston. And every time I think about that, I think, oh God, I'm going to be in Houston. The zombie apocalypse is going to start. And they're all be in Houston, of all fucking places on this planet I wouldn't want to be. Houston's one of them.
Yeah. Well, hey.
Okay, there you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the 5 Heart Podcast, where 5 hearts are all the heart that you need. We thank you for joining us this evening. We will get better with these sign-offs, but I'm going to throw it to you. And thank you very much, Mr. John Johnson, for being here with us tonight. John?
Go Big Red. We don't have a third guy. Okay, there you go. Goodbye.